Imagine a world perpetually on the brink. A world where the specter of hunger was a constant companion, where a single poor harvest could unleash widespread famine, disease, and societal collapse. This was the reality for much of early medieval Europe, a continent struggling to feed its burgeoning population with agricultural practices that were, by modern standards, incredibly inefficient. For centuries, the dominant system of cultivation was the two-field system, a seemingly logical approach that nonetheless imposed severe limitations on productivity and human potential. Under the two-field system, arable land was simply divided into two large sections. In any given year, one field would be sown with crops, typically a cereal like wheat or rye, while the other would be left fallow. To leave land fallow meant to leave it uncultivated, allowing it to rest and theoretically replenish its depleted nutrients. The reasoning was sound. Continuous cropping without replenishment would quickly exhaust the soil, rendering it barren. However, the consequence of this method was stark. At any given time, a full 50% of a community's agricultural land lay idle, producing nothing. This fundamental inefficiency created a relentless cycle of scarcity. Animal husbandry was limited. Fewer crops meant less fodder for livestock, and fewer animals meant less manure, a crucial natural fertilizer. The lack of varied nutrients in the soil led to diminished yields, perpetuating a vicious circle. Communities were largely self-sufficient out of necessity, constantly preoccupied with mere survival. There was little scope for trade, for craft specialization, or for the development of complex social structures beyond the immediate needs of the agrarian community. The intellectual and cultural life of Europe was, in many ways, tethered to the whims of the harvest, stifled by the constant pressure of feeding its people. This was the stage upon which a quiet revolution was about to unfold. The precise origins of the three-field system are, like many historical innovations, somewhat shrouded in the mists of time. It wasn't a sudden invention by a single brilliant mind, but rather an evolutionary process, a gradual understanding and adaptation of agricultural principles that emerged organically across different regions of Europe. Evidence suggests its adoption began as early as the 8th or 9th century in parts of France and gradually spread eastward, gaining widespread acceptance by the 11th and 12th centuries. It represented a fundamental shift in how land was perceived and managed, from a simple bipartite division to a more sophisticated tripartite rotation. The genius of the three-field system lay in its elegant simplicity and profound impact. Instead of two, the arable land was now divided into three large fields. The rotation unfolded over a 3-year cycle. In year one field would be sown with winter cereals, typically wheat or rye, planted in the autumn for a summer harvest. These grains were vital for bread, the staple of the medieval diet. In year two, the second field would be dedicated to spring cereals, such as oats or barley, planted in the spring for an autumn harvest. Oats were crucial for feeding horses, a rapidly growing necessity for both transport and warfare, while barley was essential for brewing ale, a safer and more common beverage than water in many areas. Crucially, the field that had grown winter cereals in year one would now be rotated to spring cereals, and so on. And then, the innovation that truly set this system apart. In year three, the third field, the one that had borne crops for 2 consecutive years, would be left fallow. This meant that only 1/3 of the land lay idle in any given year, as opposed to the 50% under the two-field system. This seemingly small adjustment had monumental repercussions. The benefits of this rotation were multifaceted. Firstly, and most obviously, it immediately increased the amount of cultivated land in production by a staggering 33%. More land under cultivation directly translated to more food, a critical factor for a growing population. Secondly, the rotation of different crops helped to naturally replenish the soil. Winter cereals and spring cereals draw different nutrients from the soil, and the fallow period allowed time for natural processes to restore some of the lost fertility. The inclusion of nitrogen-fixing legumes, though not always universally adopted at the outset, would further enhance this benefit as the system matured. This was not a perfect system of soil management, but it was a vast improvement, leading to more consistent and higher yields. The impact was not just economic, it was deeply societal, laying the groundwork for profound demographic and cultural shifts. The advent and widespread adoption of the three-field system acted as a powerful engine for growth, fundamentally reshaping the demographic and social landscape of medieval Europe. The most immediate and dramatic consequence was a significant increase in agricultural output. More food meant more mouths could be fed, directly leading to a sustained and unprecedented population boom throughout the High Middle Ages. From the 10th century onwards, Europe's population began to climb steadily, a stark contrast to the relative stagnation of earlier centuries. This population growth was not merely a matter of numbers. It brought about a cascade of further developments. With more people surviving and thriving, there was a greater pool of labor available. This surplus labor, no longer solely tied to the immediate demands of subsistence farming, could be redirected towards other endeavors. The rise in food production also meant that fewer people were needed to work the land to produce the same amount of food, or indeed, a greater amount. This freed up individuals to pursue other professions, leading to increased specialization. Artisans, craftsmen, merchants, and scholars could emerge and flourish, no longer constrained by the constant need to sow and harvest. The agricultural surplus also created the conditions for the growth of towns and cities. With a more reliable food supply, urban centers could be sustained, drawing people from the countryside seeking new opportunities. These towns became hubs of trade, commerce, and innovation, fostering a vibrant exchange of goods, ideas, and people. Markets expanded, new trade routes developed, and the rudimentary medieval economy began to blossom. The demand for goods and services beyond basic foodstuffs spurred further development in crafts and industries. Furthermore, the increased prosperity contributed to greater social stability. While famine was never entirely banished, its frequency and severity diminished considerably. This reduction in widespread hardship undoubtedly played a role in fostering a more settled society, allowing for the consolidation of feudal structures and the emergence of more sophisticated administrative systems. Lord and peasant alike benefited from the improved agricultural output, though certainly not equally. The overall economic base of feudal society strengthened, providing a foundation for the monumental cathedrals, universities, and chivalric culture that would define the High Middle Ages. The three-field system, therefore, was not merely an agricultural technique. It was a catalyst for an era of unprecedented growth and transformation. The impact of the three-field system extended far beyond simply increasing the quantity of grain. Its subtle yet profound influence rippled through various aspects of medieval life, fostering secondary benefits and stimulating further innovations. One of the most significant, though often overlooked, advantages was the diversification of crops. The inclusion of spring-sown crops like oats and barley alongside the traditional wheat and rye had a transformative effect. Oats, in particular, were crucial. The increased availability of oats directly supported a revolution in animal husbandry, specifically the greater use of horses. Prior to the three-field system, oxen were the primary beast of burden, slow and relatively inefficient. Horses, though faster and stronger, required more sophisticated feeding, and oats provided the necessary energy. With more horses available and better fed, agricultural labor became more efficient, as horses could plow more land faster than oxen. This also had a profound impact on transportation and warfare, leading to the development of better roads, more efficient carts, and the rise of heavy cavalry as a dominant military force. The humble oat, facilitated by the new rotation, became a cornerstone of medieval power and progress. The diversification also contributed to a more varied and, arguably, healthier diet for the populace. While bread remained the staple, the availability of oats and barley allowed for gruels, porridges, and greater opportunities for brewing. Although not as significant as later innovations, the very act of rotating crops, even if initially just cereals, encouraged a deeper understanding of soil properties and crop requirements. This laid the groundwork for future agricultural advancements and a more scientific approach to farming. Moreover, the three-field system facilitated a more organized and communal approach to land management. The system often worked best when implemented across entire village fields, requiring cooperation and shared decision-making among peasants. This fostered a sense of community and shared responsibility, reinforcing the social fabric of rural life. While communal farming had existed before, the structured nature of the three-field rotation often necessitated a greater degree of coordination, from plowing schedules to harvesting times. This level of organization, in turn, may have contributed to the development of more sophisticated village governance and a clearer understanding of land rights and obligations within the feudal system. The system was a testament to the power of incremental improvement and collective action. For centuries, the three-field system was the bedrock of European agriculture, powering its growth and shaping its societies. However, like all systems, it was not without its limitations, and eventually, the very success it engendered would lead to its gradual evolution and, in time, its replacement. Despite its vast improvements over the two-field system, it still retained an inherent inefficiency. One-third of the land remained fallow, unproductive, in any given year. While this was necessary for soil rest and replenishment in the absence of sophisticated fertilizers, it represented a ceiling on potential output. The system also struggled with soil nutrient depletion over the very long term. While rotation helped, it wasn't a perfect solution for maintaining optimal fertility, especially as populations continued to grow and demand for food intensified. The lack of integrated livestock farming in the fields themselves, beyond the limited use of manure from grazing during the fallow period, meant that the full potential of animal waste as fertilizer was not consistently realized. Medieval agricultural tools and techniques, though improving, remained relatively rudimentary, preventing further increases in yield per acre. The eventual decline of the three-field system, or rather its transformation, began in the early modern period, particularly with the agricultural revolutions of the 17th and 18th centuries. The key innovation that superseded it was the development of the four-field system, most famously pioneered in Norfolk, England. This revolutionary approach eliminated the fallow year entirely. Instead of leaving one field bare, it was sown with nitrogen-fixing crops like turnips or clover. These crops not only provided valuable fodder for livestock, allowing for larger and healthier herds, but also significantly enriched the soil with nitrogen, a vital nutrient. The four-field system represented a paradigm shift. It integrated arable farming with animal husbandry in a much more effective way, creating a virtuous cycle where crops fed animals, and animal manure fertilized crops. This led to dramatically higher yields per acre, further population growth, and a more robust agricultural economy. The enclosure movement, which consolidated scattered strips of land into larger, privately owned fields, also played a crucial role in enabling these more intensive and innovative farming practices. While the three-field system eventually yielded to more advanced techniques, its legacy is undeniable and profound. It was not merely a footnote in agricultural history, it was a fundamental stepping stone, a critical innovation that underpinned the transformation of medieval Europe from a struggling, largely subsistence-based society into one capable of sustaining unprecedented growth, urbanization, and cultural development. Its lasting impact can be seen in several key areas. Firstly, it laid the groundwork for modern crop rotation practices. The principle of varying crops to maintain soil health and suppress pests, though rudimentary in its medieval form, is a concept that remains central to sustainable agriculture today. It taught generations of farmers the value of diversified planting and the importance of allowing land to recover. Secondly, the three-field system was a powerful engine of demographic expansion. Without the increased food supply it generated, the sustained population growth of the High Middle Ages would simply not have been possible. This demographic boom, in turn, fueled the growth of towns, the expansion of trade, and the flourishing of intellectual and artistic endeavors that defined the medieval period. The great cathedrals, the early universities, the development of common law, all were, in a sense, made possible by the surplus food that freed human capital for pursuits beyond the farm. Finally, the system demonstrated the power of incremental innovation and adaptation. It wasn't a sudden, radical shift, but a gradual improvement built upon existing knowledge. It showcased how seemingly small changes in fundamental practices can have far-reaching, transformative consequences for entire societies. Annual crop rotation is the practice of growing a series of different types of crops in the same area across a sequence of growing seasons. It's a systematic approach to managing soil health, controlling pests and diseases, and optimizing yields without exhausting the land. It stands in stark contrast to monoculture, the continuous planting of a single crop, which, while offering simplicity in the short term, inevitably leads to a decline in soil fertility, a buildup of specific pathogens, and the proliferation of specialized weeds. The concept isn't new. Indigenous communities worldwide intuitively practiced forms of rotation, understanding the land's need for rest and variety. Early European agricultural systems, like the medieval three-field system, were primitive forms of rotation, designed primarily to allow land to lie fallow and recover. However, the sophisticated, multi-year annual cycles we recognize today represent a culmination of centuries of observation, scientific understanding, and agricultural innovation. This practice is a testament to the farmer's deep connection with their land, a recognition of the earth's rhythms and the necessity of working with them, not against them. Understanding the annual crop rotation cycle is not just about farming. It's about understanding the intricate balance of our ecosystems and the foundational principles of sustainable food production. To truly appreciate the power of annual crop rotation, we must delve beneath the surface into the vibrant, complex world of soil itself. Soil is not inert dirt. It is a living ecosystem, teeming with microorganisms, minerals, water, and organic matter. And like any ecosystem, its health and productivity depend on balance. Crop rotation helps maintain this balance through several key scientific principles. Firstly, different crops have different nutrient requirements. A heavy feeder like corn, for instance, draws large amounts of nitrogen from the soil. Planting corn year after year in the same spot would rapidly deplete nitrogen, leading to stunted growth and poor yields. Conversely, legumes, such as peas, beans, and clover, are nitrogen fixers. They have a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in their root nodules that convert atmospheric nitrogen into a form usable by plants, effectively enriching the soil. By rotating nitrogen-depleting crops with nitrogen-fixing ones, farmers can naturally replenish soil fertility, reducing the need for synthetic fertilizers. Secondly, crop rotation is a potent weapon against pests and diseases. Many pests and pathogens are crop-specific. If you continuously plant, say, potatoes in the same field, the potato blight spores or Colorado potato beetles that survive the winter will have an immediate and abundant food source the following spring. Their populations will explode. By rotating to a non-host crop, perhaps wheat or beans, the life cycle of these specific pests and diseases is disrupted. They either starve, die off, or are forced to migrate, significantly reducing their presence and the need for chemical interventions. Thirdly, rotation helps manage weeds. Different crops are susceptible to different weeds, and different cultivation practices, e.g., shallow tilling for some, deep plowing for others, favor different weed species. A varied rotation cycle prevents any single type of weed from becoming dominant, as the changing environment and competition from diverse crops keep them in check. The use of cover crops, often part of a rotation, can also suppress weeds physically and chemically. Finally, crop rotation improves soil structure and organic matter content. Crops with deep taproots, like alfalfa or some clovers, can break up compacted soil, improving aeration and water penetration. Fibrous root systems, like those of grasses and cereals, help bind soil particles together, preventing erosion. The residue left behind by different crops, roots, stems, leaves, decomposes at varying rates, contributing diverse forms of organic matter to the soil, which enhances its water-holding capacity, nutrient retention, and overall health. In essence, crop rotation is a natural and sustainable way to ensure the long-term vitality of our most precious agricultural asset, the soil. Crafting an effective annual crop rotation cycle requires understanding the distinct roles different plant families play within the agricultural ecosystem. Farmers typically categorize crops based on their growth habits, nutrient needs, and pest/disease vulnerabilities. First, we have the heavy feeders or high nitrogen demanders. These are crops like corn, wheat, oats, and many leafy green vegetables, cabbage, broccoli. They thrive on readily available nitrogen and are often planted after a legume or in a field that has recently received compost or manure. These crops are often the primary cash crops, forming the backbone of the farm's income. Next are the legumes or nitrogen fixers. This group includes peas, beans, both bush and pole varieties, clover, alfalfa, and vetch. As discussed, their unique ability to convert atmospheric nitrogen into a usable form makes them invaluable. Planting legumes helps replenish the soil naturally, reducing the need for synthetic nitrogen fertilizers, a significant economic and environmental benefit. They also provide protein-rich food for humans and excellent forage for livestock. Then there are the root crops, such as carrots, potatoes, beets, and radishes. These crops primarily draw in nutrients from deeper soil layers and can help break up soil compaction. Their cultivation often involves different soil disturbance patterns than shallow-rooted crops, which can also aid in weed control. Care must be taken with root crops like potatoes, as they are susceptible to specific soil-borne diseases that can build up if rotated improperly. Cover crops are another critical component, though they may not be harvested for food. These are plants like clover, vetch, rye, or buckwheat, planted specifically to protect and improve the soil. They are often sown after a main crop harvest, during periods when the field would otherwise lie bare. Cover crops prevent erosion, suppress weeds, add organic matter when tilled in, and some, like legumes, fix nitrogen. They are the unsung heroes of many successful rotation cycles. Finally, while not a distinct crop type, considering different plant families is crucial. For example, members of the Solanaceae family, tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, eggplants, are all susceptible to similar diseases. Rotating them with crops from unrelated families, e.g., brassicas like cabbage or cereals, is vital to break disease cycles. Similarly, various cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, share common pests. Thoughtful planning of these family rotations is key to long-term success. The complexity of these interactions underscores the art and science behind effective crop rotation. Transitioning from theory to practice, how does a farmer actually implement an annual crop rotation cycle? While the specific crops and sequence will vary greatly depending on climate, soil type, market demand, and farm size, there are common principles and popular models that guide the process. One of the simplest yet effective models is the 4-year rotation, often a modernized version of the Norfolk system. A common sequence might look like this. Year 1. Cereal crop. These are often the main cash crop, drawing heavily on soil nutrients. Year 2. Legume crop, planted to fix nitrogen and improve soil structure, often serving as a forage crop for livestock or green manure. Year 3. Root crop. These can break up compaction and utilize nutrients from different soil depths. Year 4. Another cereal or a different crop type. This further diversifies the rotation and can break pest cycles. For smaller gardens or highly diversified farms, more complex rotations might be employed, perhaps involving even more categories or a longer cycle. The key is to avoid planting the same family of plants in the same spot for at least 3, and ideally 4 or 5, years. Implementing a rotation plan requires careful record keeping. Farmers need to know what was planted where and when. Mapping out fields, tracking yields, and noting any pest or disease issues helps refine the rotation over time. Planning begins months, sometimes a year, in advance, considering the needs of each crop, its optimal planting and harvesting times, and its interaction with the preceding and succeeding crops. Consideration for irrigation, fertilization strategies, organic versus synthetic, and the use of machinery also plays a role in the rotation. For instance, a field designated for root crops might require deeper tillage than one for a no-till cover crop. The practical application of crop rotation is an ongoing learning process, constantly adapting to environmental conditions and agricultural advancements. It's a dynamic strategy, not a static rulebook, reflecting the ever-changing nature of the land itself. The annual crop rotation cycle is often lauded as a cornerstone of sustainable agriculture, and for good reason. Its environmental benefits are profound and far-reaching. By reducing reliance on synthetic fertilizers, rotation mitigates issues like nutrient runoff into waterways, which can lead to eutrophication and dead zones. Less reliance on chemical pesticides means less pollution of soil and water, preserving biodiversity and protecting beneficial insects, pollinators, and wildlife. Improved soil health, with higher organic matter content, means better carbon sequestration, helping to combat climate change by drawing atmospheric carbon dioxide into the soil. Enhanced soil structure also leads to better water infiltration, reducing surface runoff and soil erosion, particularly during heavy rainfall events. This makes farms more resilient to extreme weather patterns. Beyond the environmental stewardship, the economic benefits of crop rotation are equally compelling for farmers. Reduced input costs are a major advantage. By naturally fixing nitrogen, farmers can significantly cut back on expensive synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. By disrupting pest and disease cycles, the need for costly pesticides and fungicides is diminished. This directly translates to higher profit margins and a more financially resilient farm operation. Moreover, diversified cropping systems, inherent in rotation, offer a buffer against market fluctuations. If the price of one crop drops, the farm has other crops that might still yield a good return. This spreads financial risk. It also allows for the production of a wider variety of goods, potentially opening up new markets or allowing for direct sales to consumers who value sustainably grown produce. For the consumer, crop rotation often means healthier food grown in healthier soil. While not always directly apparent, the improved soil fertility and reduced chemical inputs associated with rotation can contribute to more nutrient-dense produce and a cleaner food chain. In an era where food security and environmental responsibility are paramount, the annual crop rotation cycle stands out as a time-tested, scientifically sound, and economically viable practice that benefits farmers, consumers, and the planet alike. It's a testament to the wisdom embedded in working with nature, not merely extracting from it. While the core principles of annual crop rotation have remained consistent for centuries, the practice continues to evolve and integrate with modern agricultural innovations. Today, research is constantly refining rotation strategies, exploring new crop combinations, and optimizing cycles for specific regional challenges and emerging environmental concerns. The integration of precision agriculture technologies is revolutionizing how rotation is managed. GPS-guided machinery allows for highly accurate planting and variable rate applications of inputs, further optimizing the benefits of rotation. Data analytics can track soil nutrient levels with greater precision, guiding farmers on which crops to plant where for maximum benefit. Remote sensing, through drones and satellites, can monitor crop health and identify potential issues, allowing for more proactive adjustments to rotation plans. There's also a growing emphasis on incorporating livestock more effectively into crop rotations, often termed integrated crop livestock systems. Animals grazing cover crops or crop residues can contribute valuable manure directly to the fields, further closing the nutrient loop and enhancing soil fertility. This revival of traditional practices, empowered by modern understanding, offers even greater sustainability benefits. Furthermore, the focus on biodiversity within and around the farm is increasing. Crop rotation naturally supports more diverse microbial life in the soil, and farmers are increasingly planting hedgerows, pollinator strips, and other habitat areas to support beneficial insects and wildlife, which in turn aid in pest control and pollination, complementing the rotation system. In conclusion, the annual crop rotation cycle is far more than just a historical farming method. It is a living, evolving practice that embodies resilience, sustainability, and ecological wisdom. From the early intuitive understanding of ancient farmers to the sophisticated scientific models of today, its fundamental purpose remains the same: to work harmoniously with the land, ensuring its health and productivity for generations to come. As we face the challenges of feeding a growing global population while safeguarding our planet, the principles of annual crop rotation stand as a beacon, guiding us towards a more sustainable and fruitful future for agriculture. A world before synthetic fertilizers, before sophisticated crop science, even before the widespread understanding of soil nutrients. For early farmers, the very act of growing food was a delicate balance with the finite resources of the earth. They observed, through countless generations of trial and error, a fundamental truth. Continuously planting the same crops in the same soil inevitably led to diminishing returns. The land would grow tired, yields would plummet, and the specter of hunger would loom large. From this ancient wisdom emerged a practice as simple as it was profound: the concept of fallow. To leave a field fallow meant to leave it uncultivated for a period, typically a growing season or even a full year. It was a deliberate act of cessation, of pausing agricultural activity, allowing the land to rest. This was not merely abandonment. It was a form of active land management, born out of necessity and intuitive understanding. Across diverse ancient civilizations, from the early agricultural societies of the Fertile Crescent to the Roman Empire, the practice of fallowing was independently discovered and widely adopted as a cornerstone of sustainable farming. The earliest and most basic form was often seen in shifting cultivation or slash-and-burn agriculture, where plots were cleared, farmed for a few years until their fertility declined, and then left fallow for much longer periods, often decades, as the community moved to new land. As populations grew and land became scarcer, this extensive fallowing became impractical. Instead, more intensive systems emerged, exemplified by the two-field system that dominated early medieval Europe. Here, half the arable land was cultivated while the other half lay fallow each year. This rotation, simple as it was, ensured that at least some portion of the land was recovering its strength, preventing total exhaustion. The decision to fallow was rooted in observation. Fields left bare seemed to regain their strength, producing better yields when eventually brought back into cultivation. While the precise scientific mechanisms were unknown, the practical outcome was clear. Fallow was not a sign of idleness or neglect. It was a critical, strategic component of ancient food production, a testament to the farmer's deep, almost spiritual, connection to the rhythms and limits of the natural world. It was an essential pause in the cycle of life, a breath taken by the land itself. For centuries, the benefits of fallow were observed but not fully understood. It was only with the advent of scientific agriculture that we began to unravel the complex biological, chemical, and physical processes that occur when land is left to rest. What might appear as empty land is, in fact, a vibrant stage for critical restorative processes. The primary benefit of fallow is the restoration of soil fertility, particularly nitrogen. Continuous cropping, especially with nitrogen-demanding cereals, rapidly depletes this vital nutrient. During a fallow period, several mechanisms contribute to nitrogen replenishment. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria, both free-living in the soil and those associated with wild legumes, which often colonize fallow land, convert atmospheric nitrogen into forms usable by plants. The decomposition of residual plant matter from previous crops and the accumulation of organic matter from new volunteer growth also slowly release nutrients back into the soil. Earthworms and other soil organisms become more active, breaking down organic material and improving nutrient cycling. Secondly, fallow periods are crucial for moisture conservation, especially in arid and semi-arid regions. Without a crop actively transpiring water, rainfall can penetrate deeper into the soil profile and be stored, creating a moisture reserve for the subsequent crop. This is particularly vital in rain-fed agriculture, where the success of a harvest often hinges on the availability of stored soil moisture. Weed control can also be integrated into fallow management, with periodic tillage to cut weeds down before they can set seed, thereby reducing the weed burden for future crops. Thirdly, and perhaps most critically for long-term health, fallow periods play a significant role in breaking pest and disease cycles. Many soil-borne pathogens, insects, and nematodes are host-specific. If their host plant is removed for a season or more, their populations crash due to starvation or lack of a suitable environment. For example, leaving a field fallow for a year can drastically reduce the inoculum of fungal diseases like rusts or blights, or deplete the numbers of certain insect larvae that rely on crop residues. This natural interruption of life cycle is a powerful, non-chemical form of pest and disease management. Finally, fallow contributes to the improvement of soil structure. The absence of heavy machinery and constant disturbance allows the soil to relax. Natural processes like wetting and drying cycles, freezing and thawing in temperate climates, and the activity of earthworms and roots contribute to the formation of stable soil aggregates. This improves aeration, water infiltration, and root penetration for subsequent crops, reducing compaction and erosion. The period of fallow, therefore, is not merely a break. It's an active period of ecological healing and regeneration. As agricultural knowledge advanced and populations continued to grow, the practice of fallowing itself evolved. The simple, extensive fallow of early times gave way to more refined and strategic approaches, reflecting both increased understanding of soil science and the pressing need for greater land productivity. A major leap came with the widespread adoption of the three-field system in medieval Europe. This system reduced the unproductive fallow land from 50% in the two-field system to one-third. One field would be planted with winter crops, like wheat, one with spring crops, like oats or barley, and the third left fallow. While still incorporating a period of rest, this was a significant intensification, allowing for more food production from the same acreage. The fallow field was often grazed by livestock, whose manure further contributed to nutrient replenishment, albeit informally. The Enlightenment and the subsequent agricultural revolutions of the 17th and 18th centuries marked a pivotal moment. The traditional fallow system, while effective, still meant leaving valuable land idle. Innovators like Charles Turnip Townsend in England championed the Norfolk four-course rotation, which famously eliminated the fallow year entirely. Instead of resting, the fallow field was planted with fodder crops like turnips or clover. These crops served a dual purpose. They provided crucial feed for livestock, allowing larger herds and more manure production, and critically, legumes like clover fixed nitrogen, actively enriching the soil rather than just letting it recover passively. This shift from passive rest to active recuperation and production was revolutionary. It represented a paradigm change. Land was no longer simply left idle. It was actively managed to regenerate and produce. This innovation allowed for unprecedented increases in agricultural output, helping to feed the rapidly industrializing populations of Europe. The Norfolk system, and variations of it, became the blueprint for modern intensive agriculture, pushing the limits of productivity and dramatically reducing the need for traditional fallow. However, despite these advancements, the core concept of giving land a break never fully disappeared. Even in modern systems, short-term fallows, or modified fallows incorporating cover crops, continue to play a critical role, adapting the ancient wisdom to contemporary challenges. In the context of modern, highly intensive agriculture, the term fallow has largely transformed from meaning idle to meaning actively managed for soil health. While true, bare fallow is still practiced in some very dry regions to conserve moisture. For the most part, modern farming has embraced sophisticated alternatives that deliver the benefits of fallow without sacrificing a growing season. The most prominent of these alternatives is the extensive use of cover crops. Rather than leaving fields bare between cash crops, farmers plant species like clover, vetch, rye, buckwheat, or radishes. These are not harvested for direct food, but serve multiple functions that mirror and enhance the benefits of traditional fallow. Nitrogen fixation. Leguminous cover crops like clover or vetch actively fix nitrogen, enriching the soil for the subsequent cash crop. Erosion control. The root systems and biomass of cover crops protect the soil from wind and water erosion, a major problem with bare fallow. Weed suppression. A dense cover crop canopy can effectively smother weeds, reducing their growth and seed production. Organic matter addition. When cover crops are terminated, either by mowing, rolling, or light tillage, and allowed to decompose, they significantly add organic matter to the soil, improving its structure, water-holding capacity, and nutrient retention. Pest and disease management. Some cover crops can act as trap crops for pests or release compounds that suppress nematodes. Their presence can also support beneficial insect populations. Another modern approach that complements fallow principles is conservation tillage, including no-till farming. By disturbing the soil as little as possible, farmers aim to mimic natural processes, allowing soil structure to build naturally and organic matter to accumulate. While not a direct substitute for fallow, conservation tillage reduces compaction and erosion, creating a healthier environment for crop growth, reducing the need for a rest period to repair damaged soil structure. In drought-prone areas, a specific form of modern fallow known as chemfallow is sometimes practiced. This involves using herbicides to keep the field completely bare, maximizing moisture conservation by eliminating any plant transpiration. While effective for moisture, it has environmental drawbacks compared to cover cropping due to herbicide use and the lack of organic matter addition. The critical role of fallow has not diminished, it has simply evolved. From passive rest to active restoration through cover cropping and integrated systems, the fundamental understanding that land needs periods of non-production or alternative production for its long-term health remains a cornerstone of sustainable agriculture worldwide. While the benefits of fallow in its traditional and modern forms are undeniable, the decision to implement a fallow period, or its equivalent, involves significant economic and environmental trade-offs that farmers must constantly weigh. The most obvious economic challenge of traditional bare fallow is the loss of immediate income. A field that is fallow is a field that is not producing a cash crop for that season. For many farmers, especially those operating on thin margins, dedicating a significant portion of their land to non-production can be financially challenging. This was a primary driver for the move away from the two-field system towards more intensive rotations. Even with modern cover cropping, there's an investment in seeds, planting, and termination without a direct saleable product from the cover crop itself. The economic return is long-term, through improved soil health and reduced input costs for subsequent cash crops. However, the long-term economic benefits often outweigh the short-term costs. Reduced need for synthetic fertilizers and pesticides translates into significant savings. Improved soil health leads to more consistent and higher yields in subsequent years, providing a more reliable income stream. Better soil structure and water retention reduce the risk of crop failure during periods of drought, enhancing resilience. Fallowing, in essence, is an investment in the farm's future productivity. Environmentally, the trade-offs are also complex. Traditional bare fallow, while restoring nutrients, leaves the soil vulnerable to erosion by wind and water. This can lead to topsoil loss, dust storms, and sedimentation in waterways. It also results in the loss of organic matter through oxidation. Modern cover cropping and conservation tillage, however, largely mitigate these negative environmental impacts, enhancing the positive ones. Cover crops, as discussed, prevent erosion, sequester carbon, improve water quality, and support biodiversity. The choice of fallow strategy is thus a nuanced decision, influenced by climate, soil type, crop prices, and a farmer's personal philosophy. It's a balance between maximizing short-term yield and ensuring long-term ecological and economic sustainability. The critical role of fallow, in whatever form it takes, lies in its ability to force this important conversation in strategic planning. In an era of increasing demand for food, shrinking arable land, and growing environmental concerns, the critical role of fallow, in its varied manifestations, remains as relevant as ever. It is a concept that transcends mere agricultural technique, embodying a profound wisdom about the necessity of rest and renewal in all living systems. From the ancient farmer who intuitively allowed his land to breathe, to the medieval peasant who understood the rhythm of three fields, to the modern conservationist who plants intricate mixes of cover crops, the underlying principle is the same. The earth, like any living entity, requires periods of recuperation to sustain its vitality. This understanding is crucial not just for agriculture, but for our broader relationship with the environment. The legacy of fallow teaches us about the limits of exploitation and the power of regeneration. It reminds us that productivity cannot be endless without periods of investment in the underlying resource. It highlights the interconnectedness of soil health, plant health, and ultimately, human health. As we look to the future of food production, the lessons learned from centuries of fallow remain paramount. Whether it's a traditional bare field basking in the sun, a vibrant tapestry of cover crops teeming with life, or the undisturbed soil beneath a no-till system, the spirit of fallow endures. It is the conscious decision to step back, to allow natural processes to restore and rebuild, ensuring that the land can continue to nourish us for generations to come. The critical role of fallow is not just about growing crops, it's about growing a sustainable future. Look around you. Every bite of food we eat, every fiber in our clothes, the very air we breathe, it all ultimately traces back to an invisible, intricate dance happening just beneath our feet, the dance of nutrients in the soil. For too long, humanity viewed the earth as an endless wellspring, a resource to be exploited, its bounty simply extracted. We poured in chemicals, we pushed yields, often without truly listening to the quiet, insistent whispers of the land. But the soil is not an inert substrate. It is a living, breathing entity, a complex ecosystem of minerals, water, air, and billions of microorganisms. And it demands respect and, above all, balanced nutrient management. This isn't just about throwing some fertilizer on a field. It's about understanding the intricate needs of plants, the delicate chemistry of the soil, and the profound interconnectedness of every living thing on this planet. It's about recognizing that every nutrient taken from the soil for our sustenance must, in some form, be replenished, not just blindly, but thoughtfully, precisely, and with foresight. The age of brute force agriculture is waning. The era of intelligent, holistic, and balanced nutrient management is not just arriving. It is an imperative. Imagine a finale tuned orchestra. Each instrument, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, micronutrients, plays a vital role. If one is too loud or too quiet, the harmony is lost. Similarly, in the soil, A deficiency in one nutrient can cripple growth, even if others are abundant. An excess can be just as damaging, leading to imbalances, toxicity, and environmental harm. Balanced nutrient management is the art and science of ensuring every instrument plays its part in perfect synchronicity, creating a symphony of life within the soil for the benefit of all life above it. This is our debt to the soil and the key to a sustainable future. To achieve balance, we must first understand the players. The essential elements that fuel plant growth are broadly categorized into macronutrients and micronutrients, each vital, each with its own role, and each requiring careful stewardship. The macronutrients are the heavy hitters, needed in larger quantities. First, nitrogen, and often called the growth nutrient. Nitrogen is the powerhouse behind lush, green vegetative growth. It's a fundamental component of chlorophyll, the molecule that enables photosynthesis. Without adequate nitrogen, plants are pale, stunted, and unproductive. However, excess nitrogen can lead to weak, leggy growth, increased susceptibility to pests, and, critically, significant environmental pollution through runoff and leaching into waterways, contributing to harmful algal blooms and dead zones. Next, phosphorus, P. This is the energy currency of the plant world. Phosphorus is essential for root development, flowering, fruiting, and energy transfer within the plant. It's the nutrient that fuels the very engine of plant metabolism. Deficiencies lead to purple leaves, poor root systems, and reduced yields. While less mobile in the soil than nitrogen, an excess can tie up other vital micronutrients, making them unavailable to plants. Then, potassium, K, the regulator. Potassium plays a crucial role in water uptake and retention, enzyme activation, disease resistance, and overall plant vigor. It helps strengthen cell walls, making plants more resilient. A lack of potassium often manifests as yellowing or browning along leaf margins. Beyond these big three, other macronutrients like calcium, Ca, magnesium, Mg, and sulfur, S, are equally indispensable for various physiological processes, from cell wall formation to enzyme activation and protein synthesis. The micronutrients, though needed in much smaller amounts, are no less critical. Iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, molybdenum, and chlorine. These are the silent workhorses, the cofactors and catalysts that enable complex biochemical reactions. A tiny deficiency in, say, boron can lead to complete crop failure, despite abundant macronutrients. It's like a complex machine missing a single, tiny screw. It simply won't function. Balanced nutrient management recognizes that every single one of these elements matters, and their intricate interplay dictates the health and productivity of the entire system. Before we can manage, we must listen. The heart of balanced nutrient management lies in accurate assessment, understanding precisely what the soil holds, what the plants need, and what the environment can sustain. This is where scientific rigor meets the art of observation. The foundation of assessment is soil testing. This isn't a one-time event. It's a regular diagnostic tool, like a physical checkup for your land. Soil samples, taken systematically from across a field, are analyzed in a laboratory to reveal pH levels, organic matter content, and the precise concentrations of all macro and micronutrients. pH is particularly critical, as it dictates the availability of nutrients to plants. A pH that is too acidic or too alkaline can lock up nutrients, making them inaccessible even if they are present in the soil. Soil testing provides the crucial baseline data, moving us beyond guesswork to informed decision-making. Beyond the soil itself, tissue testing of the plants provides another vital layer of information. Analyzing the nutrient content of plant leaves or stems during different growth stages can reveal hidden deficiencies or excesses that might not yet be apparent as visual symptoms. This allows for timely corrective action, often through foliar applications, preventing yield losses. But assessment isn't just about laboratory numbers. It's also about the farmer's keen observation. The color of leaves, the vigor of growth, the presence of specific weeds, which can sometimes indicate soil conditions, the overall health of the ecosystem. These are all clues. A farmer who truly practices balanced nutrient management is constantly observing, learning, and adapting. They are scientists in the field, interpreting the language of the land. Finally, a holistic approach considers the history of the field, what crops were grown previously, what fertilizers or amendments were applied, and what were the historical yields. Integrating all these data points, laboratory analysis, visual observation, and historical context, creates a comprehensive picture, allowing for truly balanced and responsive nutrient strategies, ensuring that every input is purposeful, not wasteful. This is how we move from reactive problem-solving to proactive, intelligent stewardship. Once we understand the needs, how do we deliver them in a balanced way? The toolkit for balanced nutrient management is diverse, encompassing both conventional and organic approaches, all aimed at precision and efficiency. For conventional agriculture, synthetic fertilizers remain a primary tool. However, balanced management means moving away from broadcast shotgun applications. Instead, it emphasizes precision nutrient management guided by soil tests. This involves the modern paradigm for balanced nutrient management often involves integrating these approaches, using organic amendments to build long-term soil health, while precisely applying targeted synthetic fertilizers when necessary to correct specific deficiencies or support peak growth. It's about leveraging every tool judiciously and intelligently to nurture the soil, not deplete it. The impact of balanced nutrient management extends far beyond the farm gate. It is a critical component of environmental stewardship and a fundamental pillar of our collective societal responsibility. Imbalanced nutrient use has profound, negative consequences that ripple through ecosystems and affect human well-being. The most significant environmental threat from imbalanced nutrient management is water pollution. Excess nitrogen and phosphorus, particularly from synthetic fertilizers, can leach through the soil into groundwater or run off into rivers, lakes, and oceans. This nutrient loading fuels algal blooms, which deplete oxygen in the water as they decompose, creating dead zones where aquatic life cannot survive. The Gulf of Mexico dead zone, largely fed by agricultural runoff from the Mississippi River Basin, is a stark example of this global problem. Nitrates in drinking water, also linked to agricultural runoff, pose a direct health risk to humans, particularly infants. Greenhouse gas emissions are another critical concern. The production of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers is an energy-intensive process, contributing to carbon emissions. Furthermore, when excess nitrogen is applied to soil, it can be converted by microbes into nitrous oxide, a potent greenhouse gas, far more impactful than carbon dioxide. Balanced nutrient management by optimizing fertilizer use and promoting natural cycling helps mitigate these emissions, making agriculture a part of the climate solution, not just the problem. From a societal perspective, balanced nutrient management contributes to food security by ensuring the long-term productivity of our agricultural lands. Soil degradation, caused by imbalanced practices, is a global crisis, threatening the very foundation of our food supply. By protecting and enhancing soil health, we ensure that future generations will have fertile land to grow their food. It also supports the economic viability of farms by reducing input costs and increasing long-term yields, contributing to a more stable rural economy. Ultimately, balanced nutrient management is about respecting the limits of our planet and acting as responsible stewards of its precious resources. It's a recognition that every decision made on a farm field has a ripple effect, connecting us all to the invisible dance beneath our feet. We stand at a critical juncture. The demands on our agricultural systems are immense, driven by a growing global population and the accelerating impacts of climate change. Yet, the path forward is not one of greater extraction, but of greater intelligence, greater harmony, and greater balance. The call for balanced nutrient management is, in essence, a call for a renewed covenant with the earth. It requires a shift in mindset, from viewing the soil as a mere growing medium to recognizing it as a living entity that requires constant care and strategic replenishment. It demands continuous learning, adaptation, and the integration of cutting-edge science with time-honored ecological principles. It means moving beyond simply achieving yield to optimizing yield sustainably, ensuring the health of the entire agroecosystem. For farmers, this means embracing precision technologies, investing in soil testing and analysis, adopting diverse crop rotations, and integrating organic matter and biological processes. For consumers, it means supporting farming practices that prioritize soil health, understanding that the quality of our food is inextricably linked to the quality of the soil it grows in. For researchers and policymakers, it means continuing to innovate, to develop new tools and strategies, and to create supportive frameworks that incentivize truly balanced and regenerative agriculture. The future of food, the health of our planet, and the well-being of humanity are all profoundly intertwined with the principles of balanced nutrient management. It's not just about what we put into the soil, but how we understand its needs, how we listen to its whispers, and how we participate in its invisible dance. It is the path to truly sustainable abundance, ensuring that the earth continues to provide for us, generation after generation, in a grand, harmonious symphony of life. The time for balance is now. Okay, for reduced risk of famine, let's go for a dramatic, empathetic, and ultimately hopeful style. We'll focus on the human impact, the historical struggle, and the incredible progress, though still imperfect, achieved through agricultural and systemic advancements. It will be less about the technical details and more about the narrative of human survival and ingenuity. Here is the 2,000-word voiceover script on reduced risk of famine. For much of human history, famine was not an anomaly. It was a recurring, terrifying companion, a relentless shadow stretching across civilizations, from the earliest agricultural settlements to the most sophisticated empires. It wasn't just a lack of food, it was a brutal, drawn-out process of societal collapse, desperation, and untold suffering. Imagine a sky that refuses to rain, or a sudden blight that turns vibrant green fields to withered brown in a matter of days. Imagine the slow, agonizing realization that there will not be enough. Not enough for your children, not enough for your neighbors, not enough for anyone. This was the grim reality that shaped human societies for millennia. Empires rose and fell not just by conquest, but by the capricious whims of nature. Droughts, floods, pests, and diseases could, in a single season, wipe out entire harvests, transforming bustling communities into ghost towns, scattering survivors in desperate migrations, or reducing populations by catastrophic numbers. The Irish potato famine, the Bengal famine, the Holodomor in Ukraine. These are not distant historical footnotes. They are stark reminders, etched into the collective memory of humanity, of just how fragile our food supply can be. In those times, life was a precarious dance on the edge of the abyss. Every harvest was a gamble, every winter a test of endurance. There were no global aid organizations, no rapid transportation of food across continents, no deep scientific understanding of crop resilience or soil health. Communities were largely isolated, their fate sealed by the productivity of their immediate surroundings. Survival was a daily preoccupation, leaving little room for art, for philosophy, for the full flourishing of human potential. The constant threat of famine was not merely an economic problem. It was an existential one, a defining feature of the human condition that underscored our vulnerability to the raw power of nature. But humanity, against all odds, refused to be perpetually shackled by this fear. The fight against famine began not with grand declarations, but with humble seeds and the ingenuity of desperate hands. The earliest triumphs against starvation were born from agricultural revolutions, slow, incremental changes that, over centuries, began to tip the scales ever so slightly in humanity's favor. The shift from nomadic hunter-gatherer societies to settled agriculture, though it brought new challenges like sedentary disease and increased population density, was the first profound step. Cultivating crops and domesticating animals allowed for a more reliable, if still vulnerable, food supply. The sheer act of purposefully growing food, rather than simply foraging for it, marked a fundamental change in our relationship with nature. Then came innovations like irrigation, diverting precious water to parched fields, a technology mastered by ancient Egyptians, Mesopotamians, and countless other civilizations. This was an early form of resilience, insulating harvests, however partially, from the caprice of rainfall. The invention of the plow, a simple but revolutionary tool, allowed farmers to break through tougher soils and cultivate larger areas, unlocking more land for food production. Perhaps one of the most significant early systemic changes was the adoption of rudimentary crop rotation, notably the three-field system in medieval Europe. This wasn't about radical abundance, but about reducing the staggering inefficiency of earlier methods. By leaving only one-third of the land fallow instead of half, it immediately increased cultivated acreage and diversified crops, providing slightly more resilient yields. While famine remained a brutal reality, these innovations, over hundreds of years, gradually built a buffer, creating marginal surpluses that allowed populations to grow, towns to emerge, and societies to become more complex. These early agricultural revolutions were not about eliminating famine entirely, but about reducing its frequency and severity, creating the foundational conditions for future, more dramatic breakthroughs. They were the first crucial steps on a long journey away from the edge of perpetual hunger. The true turning point in humanity's war against famine arrived with the dawn of the scientific age. Suddenly, we weren't just observing. We were understanding the fundamental processes of growth, soil, and disease. This shift from empirical observation to scientific inquiry unleashed an era of unprecedented agricultural advancement, systematically dismantling the forces that had long held famine in check. The discovery of essential plant nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and the subsequent development of synthetic fertilizers in the 19th and 20th centuries were game changers. No longer were farmers entirely reliant on slow, natural nutrient cycles or scarce organic matter. Suddenly, exhausted soils could be revitalized and yields could be dramatically boosted, even in infertile areas. This allowed for intensive cultivation, supporting larger populations than ever before. Concurrently, the science of genetics and plant breeding began to flourish. Scientists painstakingly crossbred varieties to develop crops that were higher yielding, more resistant to pests and diseases, and better adapted to specific climates. The development of hybrid corn, for example, transformed agricultural landscapes across North America. This was farming by design, moving beyond the random chance of nature. The mid-20th century witnessed the unparalleled impact of the Green Revolution. Spearheaded by visionary scientists like Norman Borlaug, this global initiative focused on developing high-yielding varieties of staple crops like wheat and rice, coupled with improved irrigation, fertilizers, and modern farm management techniques. The results were staggering. Countries like India, once on the brink of mass starvation, achieved food self-sufficiency, often doubling or tripling their grain production in a matter of decades. Millions, perhaps billions, of lives were saved. The Green Revolution demonstrated that human ingenuity, applied systematically and scientifically, could fundamentally alter the trajectory of hunger on a global scale. It was a triumph of the human mind over the limitations of the earth. While increased food production was a monumental achievement, it soon became clear that famine was not just a problem of scarcity. It was also a problem of access. Food could exist in abundance globally, yet people could still starve due to poverty, conflict, or logistical failures. This realization shifted the focus of the fight against famine to include broader, systemic solutions. The development of sophisticated transportation networks, railways, highways, and global shipping routes allowed food to be moved rapidly from areas of surplus to areas of deficit. No longer were communities entirely isolated. A poor harvest in one region could be mitigated by supplies from another. This global connectivity, though complex, significantly reduced the likelihood of localized crop failures spiraling into widespread famine. Economic stability and market integration also play a crucial role. When farmers can reliably sell their produce and consumers have the purchasing power to buy it, food flows more efficiently. Policies that support farmers, stabilize food prices, and create robust market infrastructure are essential for preventing food crises. International trade agreements, while sometimes controversial, can help ensure a global distribution of food that responds to local needs. Furthermore, the rise of early warning systems and international humanitarian aid organizations transform disaster response. Satellites monitor weather patterns, agronomists track crop health, and NGOs are poised to deliver emergency food aid, medical supplies, and logistical support to affected areas. While challenges remain, the ability to predict, prepare for, and respond to potential famines has dramatically improved, turning what was once an unavoidable catastrophe into a manageable crisis. The focus moved from simply growing more to ensuring that what is grown can reach those who need it most, even in the face of adversity. This holistic approach, integrating production with distribution and support, has become a hallmark of our modern fight against hunger. Despite incredible progress, the shadow of famine, though diminished, has not been entirely banished. While the catastrophic, millions-dead famines of previous centuries are thankfully rarer, localized food crises, driven by a new constellation of challenges, persist. Conflict and political instability have emerged as the primary drivers of modern famine. Food insecurity becomes a weapon of war. Supply lines are disrupted, and populations are displaced, preventing them from farming or accessing markets. Regions like Yemen, South Sudan, and parts of the Sahel continually grapple with acute food shortages not primarily due to agricultural failure, but due to human-made crises. Climate change presents another, increasingly urgent threat. Extreme weather events, prolonged droughts, devastating floods, unprecedented heat waves, and erratic rainfall patterns are directly impacting agricultural productivity in vulnerable regions. Shifting climate zones also alter the spread of pests and diseases, posing new challenges to crop resilience. As climate change intensifies, so too does the risk of environmental factors triggering food crises. Poverty and inequality remain fundamental underlying causes. Even with abundant global food production, millions still lack the economic means to access nutritious food. Systemic inequalities, inadequate infrastructure, and poor governance can leave vast populations vulnerable, turning minor disruptions into full-blown humanitarian crises. The hidden hunger of micronutrient deficiencies also remains a pervasive global health problem, even where calorie intake might be sufficient. The sheer scale of the global population, now exceeding 8 billion, places continuous pressure on agricultural systems. While production has kept pace so far, the challenge of sustainably feeding ever more people, while protecting the environment and adapting to climate change, is immense. These are the persistent shadows and new challenges that define the current phase of humanity's ongoing struggle against hunger. The quest for a world free from famine is far from over, but the progress made gives us reason for cautious optimism and renewed determination. The lessons of history are clear. Sustained innovation, global cooperation, and an unwavering commitment to human dignity are our most powerful tools. The future of reducing the risk of famine lies in a multi-pronged approach. The reduction in the risk of catastrophic famine is one of humanity's greatest, yet often unsung, achievements. It is a testament to our capacity for innovation, cooperation, and empathy. While the work is far from finished, and millions still suffer from hunger, the vision of a world where every individual has access to safe, nutritious food is no longer a distant dream. It is an achievable goal, rooted in the hard-won lessons of the past and powered by the relentless drive for a more just and sustainable future. This ongoing quest, this unwavering commitment to human dignity, defines our journey forward.